Here's a psychological fact you're not ready for. Most people are not thinking about you at all. They're not replaying your mistakes. They're not judging your outfit, your voice, the way you laughed too loudly in that meeting, or the awkward thing you said at that dinner 3 weeks ago. They moved on the moment it happened. But you're still there, sitting with it, turning it over and over in your mind like a stone you can't put down. And here's what makes it even worse. That obsession with what others think isn't just uncomfortable. It's costing you. It's quietly controlling your biggest decisions, who you allow yourself to become, what you say or don't say, what you pursue or quietly give up on because the fear of judgment felt louder than the desire to try. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it the spotlight effect. And once you truly understand it, not just intellectually, but in your gut, you're going to realize how much power you've handed over to people who weren't even paying attention in the first place. So let's go through this carefully, because this is not just a feel-good motivational video. This is psychology. This is real. And if you let it, it will change the way you move through the world. Part 1. The spotlight effect. Nobody is watching as closely as you think. Let's start with the core problem. Your brain is wired to believe you're standing under a spotlight at all times, that every person in the room is tracking your movements, cataloging your mistakes, and forming permanent opinions about your worth as a human being. And this belief shapes everything: what you wear, what you say, whether you raise your hand, whether you share your idea, whether you post the thing, start the business, take the risk. But here's the truth that your brain isn't telling you. The spotlight is almost entirely in your head. Research from Cornell University found that people consistently overestimate how much others notice them. In one study, participants were asked to wear an embarrassing t-shirt into a room full of people. Afterward, they estimated that about half the people in the room noticed. The actual number, less than a quarter, less than half of what they feared. That gap between what you think people notice and what they actually notice is the spotlight effect. And your brain creates it for a very specific reason. Thousands of years ago, being watched by your tribe actually mattered. If you made a mistake that got you excluded from the group, you didn't survive alone in the wild. Social rejection wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. It could mean death. So your brain evolved to be hyper-aware of how others perceive you, to run constant simulations of social threat, to scream at you when you did something that might make the group turn away. That system saved your ancestors. But here's the problem. Your nervous system hasn't gotten the update. It's still running ancient software in a modern world. Today, if you say something awkward at a party, no one leaves you to die in the wilderness. You experience a moment of discomfort. That's it. But your brain treats it like survival. And because your brain treats it like survival, it lies to you. It inflates the size of the spotlight. It tells you everyone saw, everyone remembers, everyone cares. They don't. The next time you walk into a room convinced that every eye is on you, remember this: every single person in that room is running their own internal spotlight. They're all preoccupied with how they look, what they said, whether people like them. Nobody has leftover attention to obsess about you because they're too busy obsessing about themselves. The spotlight is real, but it's pointing at everyone, including you, and none of you can actually see through each other's lenses. Part 2. Why your self-worth got outsourced. And what it's really costing you. Now let's go deeper, because the spotlight effect is really just a symptom of a deeper wound. And that wound is this: somewhere along the way, you learned that your value as a person was something other people got to decide. Maybe it happened in childhood, when praise from a parent felt like oxygen and disapproval felt like suffocation. Maybe it happened in school, where social acceptance was the most important currency, and you learned to shape yourself to earn it. Maybe it happened in a relationship or a workplace, where your worth was constantly measured against someone else's expectations. However it happened, the result is the same. You developed a habit of looking outward to figure out how you're doing inward. And that habit, that constant checking of the external mirror, creates something psychologists call contingent self-esteem. Your sense of worth is contingent, meaning it depends on conditions being met, on people approving, on feedback being positive, on being liked, validated, included. Here's why that's so destructive. Contingent self-esteem is by nature unstable because you cannot control other people's opinions. You will never be able to guarantee that everyone approves of you, so you are building your sense of self on a foundation that can shift at any moment without warning, based entirely on factors outside your control, and your nervous system knows this, which is why you feel anxious so often, which is why you ruminate after social interactions, replaying conversations, second-guessing what you said, wondering how it landed, which is why one critical comment can undo weeks of positive feedback in an instant, because deep down, part of you knows the foundation is unstable, and it's waiting for it to crack. Here's the part that's really painful to hear. The more you seek approval from others, the less authentic you become. And the less authentic you become, the more you lose the one thing that creates genuine self-respect. The experience of being true to yourself. You start performing. You edit yourself before you speak. You agree with things you don't believe. You stay quiet when you want to speak up. You dress for other people's comfort, not your own. You make choices based on what you think will be received well, not what actually matters to you. And over time, you drift so far from who you actually are that you can barely recognize yourself. The opinions you've spent all this energy trying to earn, they were never worth that price. Part 3. Rejection activates real pain. But your brain is lying about the danger. Let's talk about why this is so hard to change, even when you know it intellectually. Because here's what most people don't know. Rejection doesn't just feel bad, it activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Naomi Eisenberger and Matthew Lieberman at UCLA conducted brain imaging studies showing that social rejection, being excluded, criticized, dismissed, lights up the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insula. These are the same areas that register physical hurt. When someone criticizes you, your brain experiences it as pain, not metaphorically, neurologically. This is why you can't just not care what people think, because caring is wired into your survival circuitry. The goal is never to eliminate the sensitivity. It's to stop letting your brain catastrophize about a threat that isn't as large as it's telling you. Your brain hears a criticism and it screams, danger, rejection, exclusion. The tribe is turning on you. But the actual reality, someone had an opinion. Maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe their opinion says more about their values, their insecurities, and their framework than it says about you. Maybe they were right about one thing and completely wrong about 5 others. Maybe they'll change their mind in a week. The opinion of someone else is data. It is not a verdict. It is not a definition of your value. And it is most certainly not a verdict about who you're allowed to become. Here's something worth sitting with. When someone judges you for growing, for changing, for setting a boundary, for taking up space you didn't use to occupy, they're often not reacting to you being wrong. They're reacting to you no longer fitting the role that was convenient for them. Your growth disrupted their comfort, and their discomfort got aimed at you. That's not feedback you should carry. That's a projection you should put down. But here's the truth that goes even deeper. When you strip away all the layers, the social anxiety, the people-pleasing, the obsessive overthinking, what you find underneath isn't really caring about others' opinions. What you find is a belief about yourself, a quiet, persistent voice that says, I'm not enough. And until I get enough approval, enough validation, enough outside confirmation, I don't get to feel okay. You're not chasing their opinion, you're chasing the feeling of enoughness you never learned to generate from the inside. And until you address that, until you turn toward that wound instead of away from it, no amount of approval will ever be sufficient. There will always be one more person whose opinion you need, one more standard you haven't met, one more version of yourself you need to perform. Part 4. How people-pleasing destroys the very thing you're trying to build. Here's something that most people-pleasers never see coming. The strategy doesn't work. Not only does trying to please everyone fail to earn you genuine love and respect, it actively undermines it. Think about the people you respect most. Are they the ones who agree with everything? Who shift their personality depending on who's in the room? Who are always available, always accommodating, never inconvenient? Probably not. The people who earn deep, lasting respect tend to be the people who know who they are and stay that way. people who are consistent, people who have limits and enforce them calmly, people who will sometimes disappoint you because they have values they won't compromise. In psychology, this is sometimes called the consistency principle. We trust people who behave in stable, predictable, coherent ways. We feel safe around people whose identity doesn't shift depending on the audience. And we respect, deeply, genuinely respect, people who are willing to be disliked for standing by what they believe. When you become a people pleaser, you're doing the exact opposite. You're showing everyone around you that your behavior is conditional, that it changes based on what the other person seems to want. And while they might feel comfortable in the short term, they also stop fully trusting you. Because how can they trust someone who has no stable center? Over time, people who spend a lot of time with people pleasers often stop respecting them. Not out of cruelty, but because respect requires encountering something solid, and performance has no solidity. Only authenticity does. If this is hitting close to home, I want you to stay with the discomfort for a moment, because this is the part nobody likes to hear. The version of you that's been working so hard to be liked, to stay in everyone's good graces, to never ruffle feathers. That version of you might be contributing to the very loneliness, exhaustion, and disconnection you're trying to escape. Real connection requires being real, and being real means that some people won't like it. Some people won't like you, and that has to be okay. Part 5. People forget faster than you can imagine. Now I want to give you something that might actually make you exhale. That moment you've been replaying on a loop, the thing you said that came out wrong, the presentation that didn't go as planned, the joke that fell flat, the time you cried in front of someone you didn't mean to, the argument you handled poorly. The people who witnessed it have almost certainly moved on. Your brain replays events as a learning mechanism. It's trying to extract lessons from the experience so you can do better next time. The repetition is your brain saying, I don't want this to happen again. I'm going to keep reviewing it until I'm sure I've learned from it. The problem is, that replay loop was designed for truly significant events, threats that would keep recurring if not properly processed, not for social awkwardness, not for minor embarrassments, not for the ordinary, messy human imperfection that is part of every person's daily life. Everyone else was there for 30 seconds. Then they went home and thought about their own 30 seconds of shame. They are in their own loop right now. They don't have extra memory allocated for yours. And if by some chance someone does remember, it doesn't matter nearly as much as your nervous system is insisting, because a single moment, a single slip, a single bad day does not define a person to anyone who is thinking clearly. We all know that. We all understand human imperfection when it belongs to someone else. We're just tragically unable to extend that same grace to ourselves. Start practicing it, not as spiritual bypassing, not as a way of avoiding accountability, but as an accurate reading of reality. Your mistakes are smaller in the eyes of others than they are in yours, and most of them already forgotten. How to break the cycle, starting today. So what do you actually do with all of this? The shift doesn't happen from a single insight. It happens from repeated small acts of choosing yourself over the fear of judgment. It happens from building evidence, real evidence from your own life, that the discomfort of being authentic is survivable, that being disliked by some people doesn't destroy you, that living according to your own compass feels better than performing for an invisible audience. Start small. Do one thing this week that you'd normally not do because of what someone might think. Post the thing. Voice the opinion. Wear what you actually want to wear, not recklessly, just honestly. Notice what happens. The sky does not fall. The world does not end. And slowly, your nervous system begins to update its threat assessment. Stop explaining yourself. This is subtle but powerful. People pleasers habitually over-explain and over-justify their choices, seeking pre-approval. When you find yourself launching into an elaborate explanation for a perfectly reasonable decision, catch it. You don't owe everyone a defense of how you live. I prefer it this way is a complete sentence. Change the internal question. When you're paralyzed by wondering what others will think, interrupt the loop and ask instead, am I being true to who I actually am? That question shifts authority from outside you to inside you. It makes your own judgment the relevant standard instead of an imaginary committee of critics. Accept that some people will always disagree with you. This is not failure. This is identity. The more clearly you define who you are, the more you will naturally attract some people and not others. That's not a problem to solve. That's how it's supposed to work. You are not a product designed for mass market appeal. You're a human being. Stop trying to optimize for universal approval and start optimizing for genuine alignment. Remind yourself daily, other people's opinions are information. They can be useful. They can help you grow, point out your blind spots, offer a perspective you hadn't considered, but they are not authority. They do not get to decide your worth, your direction, or your identity. That is yours. And finally, try this when you feel the grip of judgment tightening. Picture the person you're most afraid of judging you. Really picture them. And then remember, they are also afraid. They are also managing their own insecurities, their own performance, their own invisible audience. They are not a free, enlightened being looking down at you from a position of total confidence. They are a person just like you, doing their best, scared of their own version of what you're scared of. When you really absorb that, when you stop seeing people as this unified, all-knowing force passing permanent judgment and start seeing them as individuals quietly fighting their own battles, you stop taking it all so personally. And when you stop taking it personally, you start living freely. The quiet truth that changes everything. Real confidence is not the absence of criticism. It's the presence of something steady inside you that doesn't require external validation to stand. It's not, I don't care what anyone thinks. That's not freedom. That's numbness. Real confidence is, I care about growing, about being honest, about living in alignment with my values. And I'm no longer making those things negotiable based on whether everyone approves. You have spent so much energy managing how you appear to others. Imagine what becomes possible when that energy comes home to you. That is the invitation in this video. Not to become indifferent, not to stop caring about people, but to stop handing them the authority over your own life.
A final word from one human to another. If you're watching this and something in you recognizes this pattern, really recognizes it, not just abstractly but personally, I want you to know something. You are not weak for having spent years in this loop. You are not broken for caring what people think. You are human. And this is one of the most deeply human struggles that exists. The desire for belonging, for acceptance, for being seen and valued. These are not flaws. They are part of what makes us who we are. But you deserve more than a life spent performing. You deserve to know what it feels like to make a choice that is entirely yours. To say something true in a room where it might not be popular. To build something, love something, become something. Not because it will win approval, but because it is real and it is you. That life is available to you. The path to it runs straight through the discomfort of being seen exactly as you are, without edits and without apology. You're more ready for it than you think. If this video opens something in you, a recognition, an ache, a quiet resolve, then I want you to do one thing right now. Before you scroll away and let the moment pass, leave a comment below with one thing you've been holding back from doing because of fear of judgment. You don't have to explain it. Just name it, because naming it out loud, even to strangers on the internet, is itself an act of reclaiming your voice. And if you know someone who is living small because they're afraid of what people think, someone who deserves to hear this, share this video with them today. Not with a message, not with a long explanation. Just send it. Let the video say what maybe you haven't been able to say yourself. Subscribe to Mental Pulse for more psychology that doesn't just inform, it transforms. And when you're ready to go deeper, the next video is waiting for you. Because stopping living for others isn't the destination. It's just the beginning.